Thank you very much. As Rowan said, I'm a rheologist. I've been working on the inkjet field for the last 17, 18 years. We've been developing new tools, mostly looking at the rheology of ink in the print dynamic situations related to the printed. So today, I thought, how can I twist the topic, right? Instead of talking rheology, so I will take an example as a ceramic ink, take it as an example, and we'll build on it and see how much important the rheology is in terms of the jetting, reliability, and all that, okay? So what do you mean by ceramic ink? Normally, there's two definitions you do it, right? If you go to ceramic ink, then there's the ink that you put it on the ceramic tiles and all that. That's a part, but this is, I'm looking at the ceramic inks printing on glass, so which has got a ceramic inks, plus it's a glass frit, so it's a two-particle system, which is much more complex than your tile. And more important is we're printing on glass, right? So there are so many defects you talk about it that you don't see printing on the tiles. It comes when you're printing on a hard substrate. Like the former speaker talked about printing on the edges and all that, the line definition becomes a quite critical issues. When you don't see the, when you're printing on a soft substrate. So let me briefly go through it process, and hopefully at the end of the day, not the day, at the end of 30 minutes, I want to take you with two messages, right? Think inkjet. Everyone has come from the macroscopic view, but inkjet is completely different, right? We're working in a very, very micro scale. So it's a micro device, right? And then the time scale is we are looking in a tens of kilohertz, hundreds of kilohertz. So if you get the time scale in mind, and if you get the geometry in the mind, then all your physics logic that we use in using a macro scale doesn't hold valid, right? What you think is a Newtonian, what you think is a laminar flow, doesn't hold true, right? It's a Reynolds number is still 1, but I can make it a very, very chaotic flow in the printed because of the microchannel device, right? The elastic turbulence becomes important. The elasticity, viscoelasticity becomes important. So what you think ink is a Newtonian when you measure standard is never a Newtonian. For me, nothing is Newtonian. Even water is not Newtonian, right? It all depends the time scale you're looking at it, right? A mountain moves, so is a mountain a solid? No, it's a liquid, right? That's only the different time scales. So let's look at that, and we'll build on that, okay? So let me take a classic example of printing on glass. Traditionally, you'll be printing with organic ink or inorganic ceramic ink or functional inks, and Fraunhofer talked about few printing on ceramics ink and all that. Today, the topic example, I will focus on this, but the logic of the rheology holds true for everything, right? So this is inorganic ceramic inkjet inks printing on glasses. These are mostly for automotive industries, or you take it home appliance. Yeah, even the phone, back of the phones, the scratch resistance. The key component you have is the inorganic pigments, because these are cooked. But more important, you have the glass frit, because that gets fused into the glass and becomes a part of the glass. That this is, if you look at the front of your automotive, the black paint is automotive glasses printed traditionally using screen printing, but we are now moving into digital. We're doing digital printing of that too, right? Especially for the after glass market, they really want the digital printing because they don't want to hold so many screens waiting for the orders to come, right? So you can digitally print it. So the focus would be on this bit of it, inorganic ceramic inks, as an example, and I'll focus more on the rheology aspects of it. Okay? So what I said, traditionally, printing on glass normally is done, if you look at the traditional methods, it's silk screen, roller, spray coating, cut and coating, you name it. These are the standard you're doing it. And slowly the analog industries is converting to digital. Coming in the functional, they've already moved into digital from the beginning. But it's very difficult to convert people from screen printing to go into digital, right? It's very difficult to change. And plus, the sets of enamel, sets of things they're using is quite viscous and all that, and we need to convert that into digital, right? So it means the viscosity has come down. Suddenly the viscosity, instead of you're working at tens of Pascal seconds, has to come down to tens of millipascal second, yeah? And then you need to look at optical lens. And then these are printing on the glasses. Being hard substrate is difficult. And then you're thinking of people trying to convert people who are in the analog industry to convert. And these glasses, when you go to the analog industry, it's not like a functional fluid where you have a very clean room, right? The glass comes in a quantity. It just gets washed, and straight away it gets to printing, and then it gets to drying, and then it goes to tempering, right? Any defect on the substrate, glass, any cleaning issues or contamination of the wall completely changes the definitions and the digital. Yeah, with this. So we look at that. So in the last 20 years, I think there are a lot of players are coming into it, especially looking at the printing on industrial scale printers. Okay, one of the examples is the Tech Glass is there in Spain, and there are others, Diptech, another one players, and there are a few, but these are the players who are mainly focused on printing on glasses, and these are one of the printer. This was in the Glass Tech 2 years ago. So there's a Glass Tech next week. Is a Glass Tech in Düsseldorf here again, right? So let's look at what are the applications we are doing on digitally printing on it. You're laughing at it, so you see some of it. Okay, that's architectural inks. Yeah, you do it. Home appliance. You have a special application inks, resistance, and the automotive transportation. These are typical examples of it. I might play the video, maybe, and then I will skip it very quickly. How do I play it? Can you play the video, please? This is just to give you, and can you just keep the slides quickly? I've just taken this from the YouTube. Okay, so I put a full acknowledgement to the YouTube because I was. So these are some of the printers. They put on mostly in. They're now moving to single pass system, but these are about scanning heads. So you put the glasses. This normally in the industrial scale, the glass would come straight after the washing line goes into the glasses, and you'll be printing on the glasses. And remember how people touches the glasses and all that. Any contamination completely kills the definition that you printed. When it comes in flight, it's fantastic, right? When it comes in the substrate, after you see it, it doesn't. And then this process gets cooked into, so as you print it, then you can have automotive different shapes and all that. Can you skip the video, please? So just to give you an idea on it, so you can check it on the YouTube and all that is pretty much. And these are people who are now literally building industrial scale printers, especially for the glass market, and trying to convert the analog people into converting to digital. Yeah. So coming to that, it's a mechanism printing, but printing on a hard substrate. It doesn't have to be glass. It could be anything. And the surface energy and all that matters. So just to give you a background on a ceramic inkjet ink for glass, what is it? Compositions. The key component, as I said, is a glass frit, right? For this type of industry, and the inorganic pigment. And the carriers becomes a quite critical part when you're printing on a substrate because the surface weighting of your substrate really matters and how your solvent interacts matters. So you can do a polar solvent, water-based or non-polar, or wax, whatever you want to think about it. Okay? The reason people are doing all this is because with this sort of ink, once it goes into the drying and the cooking stage, it becomes a very, very highly scratch resistance, chemical resistance. So especially if you look at the outdoor architectural glass that's on the building and all that. These are the ones you do it, and digitally you print it, okay? And these are, the frits are pretty much tailor-made to match the glass's properties and all that you want to do it, application for it. So this makes a cocktail of the ink. So if you like a ceramic ink for tiles, you can just take the glass frit out and it's ceramic inks for tiles. And then if you want to think about it in the ceramic inks for tile where you're printing the glaze and all that, then put the glass frit, take the pigment out. It's pretty much it is in that category, except the thermal expansion and melting points are different. Okay, so if I take that, the frit now becomes very important because it's a complex mixture of it, compounds and all that. It's cooked up to about 1200 in the furnace and then rapidly quench it, right? And then the property, what you want in the frit, depends on what the silica plus all this component defines what type of property. So the automotive would have a completely different the frit for the automotive would have a completely different thermal expansion coefficient than you would make it for the home appliance. Okay, because in the different thermal expansion contraction cycles. And this is pretty much most print integrators are associated with the frit manufacturer. They are pretty much linked together and they're tailor-made. Pigments are pretty much pigments. So what you have it, you get a whole, these frits are quenched, furnace cooked it, you quench it rapidly, you get like a rock glass. This gets into the milling system, dry mill, bring it down to about 7-8 micron. That's what the enamel particle size is about. Okay, and digitally, we now need to bring that further. So we need to wet mill it to bring it to the paste of below 1 micron size. That's what the standard, even 2 microns. And then you have the pigment. These are fairly standard inorganic pigments you buy off the shelf. Again, these have a particle size of 3-5 microns. You bring it down to 1 micron. Again, you mill it. And then you blend these two together. You have a conch. And that gives you the concentrated ink, right? And then what you do is that, then this becomes very important. In the let down stage, you have a thinner additives you put it to make it an ink. Okay, so the choice of what you put on the thinner additives matters a lot because this glass needs to be cooked, tempered. So initially you print it wet, then you dry it, and then you cook it. So remember, when you cook it, every organic component that you put needs to be burnt out, right? So you need to be very careful what you put it into it, because at the end, only two things you wanted. You want the frit and the inorganic pigment in your final system. So any organic choice you have it is there for as intermedium until it gets to the drying stage, right? So what is it? So you have an ink. So this is the 5, 6 colors ink you make it. These are inorganic, so CMYK is out because magenta is very expensive in a, if you want to buy a magenta, you'll be paying quite a premium price. So you use 6 colors to get the color combination into it. You can get magenta now, but the cost is about 3,000, 5,000 euro a kilo, right? Compared to inorganic pigment where I get it for 20 euro a kilo. Okay, so what you do, you print on the glass, and then important thing is once you print on the glass, you do the drying process, right? And there's a lamp, IR lamp, you dry it quickly. But as the industry is going, and some people even heat the substrate glass. Seguro? Yeah? Okay, you heat the glass so it dries, its definition lies. In other places, people, straight after cooking, because the conventional people have a screen printing, it goes into the dryer oven straight away in the belt, and it dries into oven at 200. Okay, and that is the intermediate stage, so that's when it's drying. So you need to have enough green strain, the grip, because the operator will now lift the glass, took it before it goes into cooking process and all that. So you need that resins and all that. So you have a lot of viscoelastic, right? Do you have that? But remember that resin now, when I go into the tempering stage, I need to burn that, right? And that's at the 500 to 700 degrees Celsius. I will cook it. The glass fuses it. It forms a part of your glass, yeah? And that's why it becomes, like even the Coca-Cola bottle, you see the Coca-Cola white is a thermoplastic ink, but it's a frit and a pigment, right? So you can scratch resistance and all that. That's what you get it. So you really made this cocktail, and these are some of the printed samples, courtesy of Spain, Tech Glass. They do all this printing. You can make a fancy and all that on the glass after cooked, and scratch resistance, everything. So let's now look at the glass, the rheology of it. So now why do I say the rheology is so important? Rheology is pretty important. Let me get the timing correct here. Okay, rheology is now, it's a critical part of any inkjet process. The chemists really tend to neglect the importance of rheology. Okay, when it lands on the substrate, it's the chemistry. Until it lands on the substrate, it is the physics drives the printed is driven. So you really need to know the rheology. You really need to know the time scale. And the beauty, for me, it's a beauty. For others, it might be a inkjet takes all aspects of the rheology, right? We teach rheology, we divide rheology in 3 aspects, right? Shear rheology, frequency, dynamic rheology, and extensional rheology. Inkjet really looks at all 3 aspects of an extreme stage. It is a high shear rheology, it goes into high shear, it is printed at high frequency, and when you're jetting it out, it's a completely extensional, right? You'll have to really tailor all these 3 aspects if you really want to make an ink, a very good ink, or if you want to make sure that the batch-to-batch variation is exactly the same. Bulk viscosity alone has 0 meaning for me. I can give you the same ink, and I will make you different jets completely different. If you just match your bulk viscosity, bulk dynamic, surface tension, and all that. So let's look at the example. Let's just look at what happens in the ink flow. This is, some people might be, it's redundant, but I think it gives you the idea, appreciation of the rheology. So from next time, you might appreciate the rheology slightly better. Yeah. So here's the ink supply system. So you have a printer, you choose an ink supply system, and this is the ink supply system from MagnaJet. It's gravity fed, or you could have a very complex ink supply system like this, right? It's again a or you could choose any of the. So this gets fitted, comes ink here, and then from the ink, it gets into the tube, and it gets into the printer, right? And you see the red line I'm showing is the shear rate, right? Roughly the sort of shear rate that your ink will go through. That's when people talk about the viscosity, people talk about the shear rate, right? You think high shear viscosity is so important. I said, I don't care. Okay, but you'll appreciate that. So once you go into from the ink, you go into the manifold, okay? And the flow rate is about, it's quite small, so it's about 100, shear rate is about 150. But then from the manifold, it will have to go into the channel, right? The channels are about 50 microns, 60 microns, 70 microns standard inkjet channel. And then when it goes into, so if you go manifold, in some cases, you have a through flow, pseudo through flow, comes from the manifold, recycles it back to the channel, right? In other printed like ZAR, it goes into the channel. Right? So if it goes into the channels are 70 microns like that, the shear rate straight away jumps, even without pumping, yeah? We haven't printed it, you're just pumping. It goes about 10,000 shear rate, okay? And then what you do, you activate the piezo, right, when you're driving it. So then your waveform would be about hundreds of kilohertz each sub-drops. So you're talking about hundreds of kilohertz, and the total, and the printing would be 6, 7 kilos to 30 kilos, depending on what mode you're printing. When you do it, suddenly you're moving your piezo at 100, 200 kilohertz, right? You need to know the rheology at this. It's not a linear shear rheology. It's a dynamic high frequency. So viscoelastic becomes very important. And then if you have enough energy at the back of this nozzle, the ink will just come out of the nozzle, right? And that's where you talk about the high shear rate. So the high shear rate is always only at the nozzle, right? And then if it gets printed, so this is so far, it's okay. So I'm pushing it, then I got a high shear rate. So what happens when you print it now? It gets very, very long, right? Your ligament gets long, and it's extension, and you're stretching it. So it's a completely different field of the rheology. It's a non-linear. You're extending it. You have a ligament formation. It depends how it breaks it. You tail it. You get a ligature. You get a yo-yo effect. You get a bungee jumping, right? You can do everything here, okay? And these are in the time scale. What is you think is a Newtonian is not a Newtonian. And then when you print on the substrate, then substrate becomes important, right? So you have a substrate, which is now, if it's a hard substrate, drop impact becomes a very, very critical part. Okay, so when you do the drop, so this is drop impact, and you see how it spreads, the two drops, right? These are real high-speed images taking 1 million frames per second. And more important is, now these are the 3 drops, right? I can now define how I jet it. How do I play this video? It's very difficult with this one. Can I play one at a time? Yeah, play that one first. You see, I can make the bar drop jump, yeah? Can you play the second drop, second one? That's drop on drop impact, right? So you're doing double coating, triple coating, right? Double multipass, double pass. And how it spreads, how it this, then you have a definition problem. So, and the problem when you have it with don't play that one yet, yeah? People have it with, people when talk about it, when I try to convert their screen printing is, can you convert into digital? They say, can you make patterns and all that? I said, it's fantastic, it's very easy, I can do that. That's it. And then can you make straight lines, very thin? It's difficult, right? The digital is completely, whereas screen printing, they make a straight lines very easy, right? Fine straight line. For us, straight line is very difficult because you put a drop, circle, right? And you want to convert that into a straight line. Now, can you play the third one, please? I can make the drop go where I wanted it. You see, so you can. So the surface contamination, surface how you touch it, how someone with someone has put a fresh cream into it, and he touches the glasses into it. You have suddenly changed the surface energy of the glass where you lands it, right? So it completely changes the dynamics of it. So it really matters. Okay, so how you do it and how. So now suddenly what you see is a fantastic in a drop washer in flight. Suddenly on a print substrate is bad because something has wrong with the substrate, how cleaning is done. And these are industrial print people who are trying to convert it, right? The washing line is big washing line, washes, dries, it straight goes into the printer, and sometimes even it's not dried properly. Okay, so that's why the choice of the solvent you put it here becomes a very, very important factor. Okay, so this really gives you appreciation of fact, right? So now if you look at the rheology, low shear rheology, mid shear rheology, high shear rheology, right? Frequency here, dynamic rheology, viscoelastic, because the displacement of this, whatever you put, is 5-10 nanometers, right? The strain is very, very low. So that's why you say you apply the acoustic pressures and all that, you take care of it. And how much it dampens it. It's a dynamic, it's a time scale. So you really need to look at the dynamic. The problem, there aren't any rheometers that can do the dynamic in this time scale you wanted it. Okay, most of the rheometer, commercial rheometer you buy would be 100 hertz would be the maximum you will do it. Okay, and again the extension, how would you do it? Okay, so think about it. So optimum, all the ink vendors, anyone would make optimum static bulk process because alone are never a good guide to a jet. It is a good starting point, but you will never guarantee. This is why you have a batch-to-batch variation, right? People, you will always tailor that ink. So understanding the subtle change in the dynamic properties becomes a very, very important part in terms of controlling what I call is the MSR, misting satellite reliability, right? You can change. You can convert that reliability into different factors, whether it's a throw distance or a line definition. You can choose whatever. Well, I will break that into different category of it. It becomes very important. So whenever a client tells me, what do you want? I said, they say, you want the print frequency, drop speed, velocity? What do you want, right? Misting satellite reliability. I said, give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priority. You cannot get all in one. So we will prioritize, which is because the ink has to go through all that different steps, and it has to satisfy all that condition. Okay? But then how do you quantify it? Yeah, that's fine, you understand. If you cannot quantify it, you don't do it. So here's a part. So, and then I said in the substrate is a very difficult. And one of the biggest issues we have it is printing on the glass is the definition issues, right? So here's again a case of drying. Classic coffee ring effect, right? When you start drying it, the particle migrates towards the edges. So you have a color gradient. Okay, it depends how you dry it, how you cook it. Another other way effect is Marangoni effect, where the particle actually migrates to the center, so the edges are much more lighter. Classic color issues. Okay, how do you solve it? You really have to look at the ink, how you dry it, component, and all that, as you can do. Okay, this is how you change the visco. Again, another problem. This is for the automotive. We do it, replacement market. Look at this, the square definition. You see some cars in the front has a square, a circle. If they have a circle, it's quite easy. They love it, right? It's easy. If you have a square, it's difficult because you don't get the see. Sometimes by the time you coat it, and suddenly it may convert into a square, circle, because the drops like to be circle, right? These are small. And if you look at the definition, it's very, very difficult to square. It's triangular. Okay, and you really have to tweak the viscoelastic property to get it right once it lands on it. And you showed it again before, the edge definition, right? Fingering edge definition. And there's sometimes you even get the fingering, right? You know, that's not by design. It's just capillary action pulls it. Okay, we really need to tweak it. We can tweak it, we can formulate it, we can how do it. But if you get the rheology correct, even at the substrate, okay? And if you look at this how frit is a two-component system, yeah, you see that happening. So let's look at quickly. Now I will do the rheology fluid map. So here's the fluid map. Here's the, so what we do, we use a linear viscoelastic, like a tree pad, to do it. And then you look at the rheology of it. So suddenly you start seeing the dynamic rheology all the way to 10 kilohertz. Yeah? We use a tree master to look at the extensional viscosity. Can you play that video, please? And we stretch the ink, and we see how the stretching behaves. Okay? And then if we can marry these two together, can you play the video? We can look at the ink jetting, and we can combine these three to define how the ink behaves. Okay? So let's look at quickly. And so I had it on display up there, so if you can come. So this is what your traditional ceramic ink looks like it for the tiles. Okay? So viscosity and all that to go for it. It's fairly Newtonian. There's no elastic. Okay? There's just a frit with the inorganic pigment. Now let's look at how my ceramic inkjet looks like. Okay? So what you see is now you see a elastic building it up. Yeah? There's the other one didn't have elastic, so you have elastic building up. You got more shear thinning because there are more particle interactions. Let's look at this. How do you differentiate it? Now, based on this, we can differentiate a good and bad ink. Can you play these two videos, please? You can play side by side, both together. Okay? And then while this is being played, I upload. Oh, yeah? You see how it's being stretched, two inks. Yeah, one forms a nice, other has a very highly elastic. You see it when you're stretching. Initially, the polymer solvent part works, then elastic parts work. You really, really get it. So this would be very difficult to jet it. Yeah, let's look at, that's a good ink, that's a bad ink. And if you look at the rheology, on terms of, this is the viscosity curve, right? Both ink are almost identical, right? But now if you look at the viscous part, it's the same. But if you look at the elastic, it's a very different elastic behavior. But you don't see that at the low frequency, right? If you do this, almost same. But if you see higher, you start seeing different. And this tells you how elastic it is. Now look at this. What happens with this? If you print the first one, you still get the second one. Doesn't jet over the time. It just floods the whole nozzle plate. Yeah. So here's another example. Elasticity. So here's again. So look at the component analysis. You have the 5 ink. I have developed it, almost identical, right? Let me jet it out. So if you even if you look at just the viscosity of all the 5 inks, I have made it exactly the same. Surface tension is same, everything is same. It's completely different, right? That would be your batch-to-batch variation. That could be your blend variation, everything. How would you differentiate? Again, this is what this snapshot looks like. If you look at the stretching, you can see the difference, right? If I just break it. And now if you look at the elastic part of this, I'm done, yeah? You see completely different elastic behavior. We can literally pinpoint, we can literally separate the inks, we can literally see the difference between the batch-to-batch variation. Yeah, so we can even look at the point, the elasticity, how the elasticity changes with the same identical ink. Yeah. So in conclusions, I think printing on glass or the hard substrate has also much more trickier because it also has a substrate interaction becomes more. And what is the key message I want you to take is this. Yeah, ink operates in a microsecond time scales. Right? So a small difference, even in the print geometry and all that, really makes a big difference in the jetting behavior, right? So ink from the rheology, you have all sets of rheology you have to look into it, right? You have in channel, through flow, in flight, on substrate. It's high frequency, high shear, high nonlinear extensions, and high velocity impacts. So that's why it's quite interesting from that, okay? So if you can understand that, hopefully we can control the missing satellites reliability you wanted. So finally, These are our academic partners. I work with quite a lot of academic partners, including Cambridge, Oxford, Queen's, with iPrint Institute. And I thank you for it. And we also run the rheology course. If this finds interesting, at iPrint we run a rheology course, a masterclass. It's a 2-day course. The next one is in February. Is it February? Yeah. We do a complex rheology master course. And thank you very much. I would take the questions.